I like standing next to you, Sean. Makes me look so tough.
That line from The Social Network? Pure fiction. In fact, Sean Parker and Eduardo Saverin are actually friends to this day. And that's just the tip of the iceberg when it comes to what David Fincher's masterpiece got wrong about Facebook's origin story. What if I told you that Mark Zuckerberg didn't create Facebook to get girls? That the party atmosphere at Facebook's early offices was completely made up? And that one of the film's most compelling characters doesn't even exist? Today we're diving deep into The Social Network, separating Hollywood drama from Silicon Valley reality. You're about to discover how Aaron Sorkin transformed a story about coding and entrepreneurship into one of the greatest films of the 21st century by changing almost everything. The Social Network hit theaters in 2010, and critics immediately hailed it as a masterpiece. Roger Ebert called it a great film. The movie swept awards season, winning 3 Oscars, including Best Adapted Screenplay for Aaron Sorkin. But here's the thing. It's based on a book called The Accidental Billionaires by Ben Mesrich, a guy who's made a career out of turning real events into page-turning narratives. The film tells the story of how 19-year-old Harvard student Mark Zuckerberg created Facebook in his dorm room, only to face lawsuits from his co-founder Eduardo Saverin and the Winklevoss twins who claimed he stole their idea. It's a tale of friendship, betrayal, and the dark side of the American dream. But as Zuckerberg himself said after the film's release, the movie made up a bunch of stuff that I found kind of hurtful. So let's break down what really happened versus what Fincher and Sorkin created for maximum dramatic impact. Let's start with the opening scene, one of the most memorable breakups in movie history. Jesse Eisenberg's Mark Zuckerberg gets dumped by his girlfriend Erica Albright in a Cambridge bar, leading to a bitter argument where she calls him out for being obsessed with getting into Harvard's exclusive final clubs. Here's the problem. Erica Albright doesn't exist. She's a complete fabrication. The real Mark Zuckerberg did write a nasty blog post about a woman after a breakup, but her name was Jessica Alona. Aaron Sorkin changed the name to protect her privacy. Though ironically, this just drew more attention to the fact that there was a real person behind the character. But here's the bigger issue with this fictional breakup. It completely misrepresents Zuckerberg's romantic life. The movie suggests that Zuckerberg was pining after Erica throughout Facebook's early years, even ending with him sending her a friend request and obsessively refreshing the page. In reality, Zuckerberg met his future wife Priscilla Chan in 2003, the same year the movie claims he was heartbroken over Erica. They started dating around the time Facebook was created and got married in 2012. So while the movie portrays Zuckerberg as a lonely, bitter guy who can't get over his ex, he was actually in a stable, long-term relationship. This change wasn't just about protecting someone's privacy, it was about creating a more dramatically satisfying narrative. A guy who creates a social network because he's lonely and wants to connect with people? That's a story. A guy who creates it while happily dating his future wife? Less compelling from a screenwriting perspective. This brings us to one of the movie's biggest misconceptions. Why Zuckerberg created Facebook in the first place? The Social Network suggests that Facebook was born out of romantic rejection and a desire to get girls. After the breakup, Zuckerberg drunkenly creates FaceMash, a site where users can rate female students' attractiveness. This then evolves into Facebook, with the implication that it's all part of Zuckerberg's quest for social acceptance and romantic success. But in a 2010 Q&A session, Zuckerberg explicitly addressed this. They made it seem like the whole reason for making Facebook was because I wanted to get girls, or wanted to get into clubs. And that's just not true. I mean, they completely made that up. So what was the real motivation? According to Zuckerberg, he created Facebook because he enjoyed building things. He wanted to create a platform where university students could connect with each other. It wasn't about getting girls or gaining social status. It was about solving a problem he saw on campus. The FaceMash incident did happen. Zuckerberg did create a site comparing female students, and it did get him in trouble with Harvard's administration. But framing this as the inspiration for Facebook oversimplifies what was actually a more complex entrepreneurial vision. This is a perfect example of how the social network transforms a story about technical innovation and problem solving into a more relatable narrative about human emotions and social dynamics. Now let's talk about one of the movie's most emotionally powerful storylines, the friendship and eventual betrayal between Mark Zuckerberg and Eduardo Saverin. In the film, Andrew Garfield's Eduardo is portrayed as the loyal best friend who believes in Mark's vision and provides crucial early funding. He's the business guy to Mark's tech genius, and their friendship forms the emotional core of the movie. When Sean Parker enters the picture and begins influencing Mark to push Eduardo out, It feels like watching a friendship being destroyed by greed and ambition. The climactic scene where Eduardo confronts Mark about his diluted shares is one of the film's most powerful moments. Garfield's performance is heartbreaking as he realizes his best friend has essentially stolen his life's work. But here's the thing. This narrative is heavily dramatized. First, Mark and Eduardo weren't best friends. They were acquaintances who happened to work together on Facebook. Zuckerberg had other close friends at Harvard, including Adam D'Angelo, who later became Facebook's chief technology officer, but doesn't appear in the movie at all. Second, the reason Eduardo was pushed out wasn't because of Sean Parker's machinations or Mark's betrayal. It was because Eduardo was failing at his job. According to multiple sources, Eduardo was supposed to handle 3 crucial tasks: setting up the company legally, securing funding, and developing a business model. He failed at all 3. Not only that, but he began running unauthorized ads on Facebook, not for Facebook's benefit, but for his own startup company. Meanwhile, Facebook was running out of money. The company had investors lined up, but they needed Eduardo to sign off on reforming Facebook as a Delaware corporation to complete the deals. Eduardo was unreachable, and the site had to survive on loans from Zuckerberg's family. The dilution of Eduardo's shares wasn't a betrayal. It was a business decision made because he wasn't fulfilling his responsibilities. As one source put it, Eduardo was essentially fired for not doing his job. This doesn't make for as compelling a story as best friends torn apart by success, but it's closer to the truth. Speaking of Sean Parker, let's talk about how the movie completely mischaracterizes him. In The Social Network, Justin Timberlake's Sean Parker is portrayed as a charismatic but morally questionable figure who corrupts Mark and destroys his friendship with Eduardo. He's shown as someone who brings a party atmosphere to Facebook, encouraging the team to drink and act recklessly while making questionable business decisions. The real Sean Parker has called this portrayal morally reprehensible and completely inaccurate. First, Parker didn't discover Facebook through a one-night stand, as the movie suggests. He found it on his roommate's girlfriend's computer and reached out to Mark via email. They didn't start working together immediately, and their first meeting was much more low-key than the film depicts. Second, Parker wasn't the party animal the movie makes him out to be. The early Facebook office wasn't a frat house. It was a place where young entrepreneurs worked incredibly hard to build something revolutionary. Third, and most importantly, Parker was actually good for Facebook. While Eduardo was failing at his business responsibilities, Parker was succeeding. He knew Silicon Valley, he understood how to raise money, and he had experience from his time at Napster. He replaced Eduardo not through manipulation, but through competence. Parker's departure from Facebook also wasn't as dramatic as the film suggests. While he was arrested on drug possession charges in 2005, he wasn't charged, and his departure was more of a mutual decision with the board than a forced resignation. Most telling of all, Parker says he remains friends with both Mark and Eduardo to this day. So much for that climactic confrontation where Eduardo makes him flinch. Now let's talk about Cameron and Tyler Winklevoss, played by Armie Hammer in one of the film's most memorable dual performances. In The Social Network, the Winklevoss twins are portrayed as entitled Harvard athletes who hire Mark to work on their social networking site, ConnectU, only to have him steal their idea and create Facebook instead. They're shown as the perfect antagonists, privileged, athletic, and everything that Mark isn't. The movie suggests that Mark was recruited by the Winklevosses specifically because of his face mask controversy, and that he deliberately delayed work on their project while secretly developing Facebook. But according to people who were actually there, the Winklevoss twins weren't as central to Facebook's story as the movie suggests. Dustin Moskovitz, Facebook's actual co-founder, said it best. "It is interesting to see my past rewritten in a way that emphasizes things that didn't matter, like the Winklevosses, who I've still never even met, and had no part in the work we did to create the site." The real story is more mundane. Mark wasn't recruited because of face mash. He was recommended as a replacement when another programmer dropped out of the Harvard Connection project. And while the Winklevosses did eventually sue and receive a settlement, many people involved with Facebook's creation viewed their lawsuit as opportunistic rather than legitimate. The movie also suggests that Divya Narendra, the third member of the Harvard Connection team, was pushing for the lawsuit. In reality, he had largely moved on from the project by the time the twins decided to take legal action. This is another example of how the film amplifies conflict for dramatic effect. The Winklevosses make for great antagonists. They're the establishment that Mark is rebelling against, but their actual impact on Facebook's creation was minimal. One of the Social Network's most memorable sequences shows the Facebook team living in a party house in Palo Alto, complete with drinking, zip-lining into the pool, and a general atmosphere of tech bro excess. This portrayal has become iconic. It's how many people imagine the early days of Silicon Valley startups. Young entrepreneurs living fast, working hard, and playing harder. There's just one problem. it's almost entirely fictional. According to Dustin Moskovitz, who was actually there, the reality was far more mundane. A lot of exciting things happened in 2004, but mostly we just worked a lot and stressed out about things. The version in the trailer seems a lot more exciting, so I'm just going to choose to remember that we drank ourselves silly and had a lot of sex with co-eds. Mark Zuckerberg himself addressed this in 2010, saying that all the partying was fiction and that he spent years working hard and coding Facebook. The truth is that building a startup is mostly unglamorous work, long hours, stress, and constant problem solving. But that doesn't make for compelling cinema. So Sorkin and Fincher created a more visually interesting version of events that fit their themes about excess and moral corruption. This isn't necessarily wrong. Movies need to compress and dramatize real events to work as entertainment, but it's worth understanding that the reality of entrepreneurship is usually much less glamorous than Hollywood makes it seem. Here's a weird one that shows how the movie sometimes invented conflict where none existed. In The Social Network, there's a subplot about Eduardo Saverin getting into trouble over animal cruelty allegations. As part of his initiation into Harvard's Phoenix Club, he's supposed to care for a live chicken. The Harvard Crimson then publishes a story alleging that Eduardo fed the chicken poultry meat, which was seen as forced cannibalism. This incident comes up repeatedly in the movie as another source of tension between Mark and Eduardo, with Mark worried that the controversy could hurt Facebook's image, and Eduardo suspecting that Mark leaked the story out of jealousy. But here's the thing. While there was indeed a story about the Phoenix Club and chickens published in the Harvard Crimson in 2003, it made no mention of cannibalism and didn't involve Eduardo Saverin at all. This is a perfect example of how the movie takes a real event and completely fabricates a connection to its main characters. It's not just dramatic license. It's creating fictional drama out of thin air. Now, before we conclude that The Social Network is completely inaccurate, let's talk about what it got right. First, the basic timeline and major events are accurate. Facebook was created at Harvard in 2004. It did expand to other universities, and Mark did face lawsuits from both Eduardo and the Winklevoss twins. The settlements happened roughly as depicted, even if the motivations were different. Second, many of the character details are spot on. Mark Zuckerberg confirmed that the wardrobe department nailed his look. Every single shirt and fleece they had in that movie is actually a shirt or fleece that I own. The famous business cards and the pajamas to investor meeting incident also happened. Third, the movie captures something true about the culture of Silicon Valley and the psychology of entrepreneurship, even if it gets the specific details wrong. The themes of ambition, betrayal, and the cost of success resonate because they reflect real dynamics in the tech world. Fourth, the legal proceedings are accurately depicted. The movie shows the lawsuits through depositions and flashbacks, and while the personal dynamics are dramatized, the legal facts are generally correct. Most importantly, the movie captures the significance of what Facebook became, even if it misrepresents how it started. The Social Network understood that Facebook would change the world in ways that weren't fully apparent in 2010. So why does any of this matter? Why should we care whether a movie about Facebook is accurate? First, because The Social Network has become the definitive account of Facebook's origins for many people. It's shaped how we think about Mark Zuckerberg, Silicon Valley culture, and the early days of social media. When a movie is this influential, accuracy matters. Second, because the film's inaccuracies reflect broader cultural biases about technology and entrepreneurship. By portraying Facebook's creation as driven by personal grievances rather than genuine innovation, the movie reinforces the idea that tech entrepreneurs are primarily motivated by ego and social inadequacy rather than by a desire to solve problems. Third, because the real story of Facebook's creation is actually more interesting than the Hollywood version. The movie reduces a complex story about innovation, business strategy, and the challenges of scaling a startup into a simple narrative about friendship and betrayal. The real Mark Zuckerberg wasn't a socially awkward loner trying to get girls. He was a focused entrepreneur who saw an opportunity to connect people in a new way. The real Eduardo Saverin wasn't a loyal friend who got betrayed. He was a business partner who failed to meet his responsibilities. The real Sean Parker wasn't a corrupting influence. He was the experienced entrepreneur who helped Facebook grow. These truths don't make for as emotionally satisfying a story, but they're more complex and ultimately more human. Now, to be fair to Aaron Sorkin and David Fincher, they never claimed The Social Network was a documentary. Sorkin has said that he was more interested in exploring themes about communication, isolation, and the digital age than in creating a historical record. In fact, Sorkin has defended the film's departures from reality by arguing that movies need to compress and dramatize real events to work as entertainment. As he put it, the process of writing code and building a company is not a glamorous enough thing to make a movie about. This is a valid artistic choice. Movies aren't journalism. They're supposed to entertain and illuminate truth through storytelling, not provide factual documentation. The Social Network succeeds brilliantly as a movie about the themes it wants to explore. It's a meditation on loneliness in the digital age, the cost of ambition, and the way technology can both connect and isolate us. These themes are more relevant now than ever, as we've seen how social media has affected society in the years since the film's release. The movie also works as a portrait of a particular moment in American culture, the mid-2000s collision between old money establishment, represented by Harvard and the Winklevoss twins, and new money innovation, represented by Mark and Facebook. From this perspective, the factual inaccuracies don't matter as much. The movie is using the Facebook story as a vehicle to explore larger themes about technology, power, and human nature. So what's the final verdict on The Social Network? As a movie, it's a masterpiece. The performances are excellent, the dialogue is sharp, and the themes are profound. It deserves its reputation as one of the best films of the 21st century. As a historical document, it's deeply flawed. It misrepresents the motivations of its main characters, invents conflicts that didn't exist, and reduces a complex story about innovation and entrepreneurship to a simple narrative about personal grievances. But maybe that's okay. Movies aren't supposed to be history lessons. They're supposed to be art. And The Social Network succeeds as art, even if it fails as history. The real lesson here isn't that the movie is wrong. It's that reality is always more complex than any single narrative can capture. The true story of Facebook's creation involves dozens of people, countless decisions, and a web of relationships that no 2-hour movie could fully explore. What The Social Network does brilliantly is take that complex reality and distill it into a story that illuminates larger truths about technology, ambition, and human nature. It may not be factually accurate, but it's emotionally and thematically true. And in the end, that might be more important than getting every detail right. The Social Network reminds us that behind every technological revolution are real people, with real motivations, relationships, and conflicts. It humanizes a story that could easily become abstract and helps us understand the human cost of innovation. Whether you see it as the definitive account of Facebook's origins or as a brilliant work of fiction inspired by real events, The Social Network remains one of the most important films about the digital age, and a perfect example of how movies can transform reality into art. So there you have it, the real story behind The Social Network. What did you think? Were you surprised by how much the movie changed? Let me know in the comments below. If you enjoyed this deep dive into movie versus reality, make sure to hit that subscribe button and ring the notification bell. I've got more videos coming up that explore the true stories behind your favorite films. And remember, the next time you're watching a based on a true story movie, take it with a grain of salt. The truth is usually more complicated than Hollywood makes it seem. Let me know in the comments what movie you'd like broken down next. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you in the next video.